that they rule out the possibility that this is a mere legend. And then you know what the third E stands for? We have an empty tomb. We have an empty. How do we know the tomb was empty? You know what I think the strongest, I could give you a bunch of reasons, but I'll tell you what I think the strongest evidence is that the tomb was empty. And that is even the opponents of Jesus, even the critics of Jesus, even the enemies of Jesus admitted that the tomb was empty. How do we know? Because they bribed the guards to make up the story that the guards fell asleep and the disciples stole the body. Now, it doesn't make any sense. Disciples didn't have the motive or the means or the opportunity. It didn't make sense then, doesn't make sense now. But here's the point. Why are you making up a cover story if the body is still in the tomb? When you make up a cover story, you're admitting that the tomb is empty. Now we better come up with an explanation to explain it away. So even the opponents of Jesus are conceding that the tomb was empty. Friends, history has never doubted that the tomb of Jesus was empty. That's never been the issue. The issue has always been, how did it get empty? And I went through the usual list of suspects. You know, Romans weren't about to steal the body. They wanted Jesus dead. Jewish leaders weren't about to steal the body. They wanted Jesus to stay dead. Disciples weren't about to steal the body. Why? So they could live a life of deprivation and suffering and then be tortured to death for what they knew was a lie? I don't think so. I think the best explanation for the empty tomb is that Jesus physically returned from the dead, especially when you combine it with the fourth word that begins with the letter E, which is the word eyewitnesses. Not only do we have an empty tomb, but over a period of time, Jesus appeared alive a dozen different times to more than 515 eyewitnesses, including to opponents like Saul of Tarsus, who became Paul, the great apostle of the church, to tender-hearted people, to believers, to non-believers. He appeared indoors and outdoors, and people touched him, they ate with him, they talked with him. I mean, this is incredible. 515 eyewitnesses. I mean, as legal affairs editor of the Chicago Tribune, I would cover major trials around the country. I covered cases where the death penalty was hanging in the balance. And I've never seen a case with 515 eyewitnesses. I mean, think about this. If we were to create a courtroom on this stage, and we were to put a witness stand here, and we were to call to the witness stand one at a time every individual who encountered the resurrected Jesus, and we allow them to testify and be cross-examined for just 15 minutes each, and we sat here around the clock, do you realize we'd be sitting here for 5 straight days? How many people, after listening to 128 straight hours of eyewitness testimony, would walk out saying, I don't believe it? I mean, come on. Now, as an atheist, I had to find a way to explain this away. I had to find a loophole. I had to find an escape hatch, and I thought I came up with it. Wait a minute. These were just hallucinations. Could be, right? Could be that they just hallucinated this. Seeing Jesus? Could be. Famous atheist just wrote a book. You know what he says these appearances of Jesus were? Hallucinations. There you go. It kind of explains it away, doesn't it? But you know what? Hey, I'm a journalist. I check things out. So I found an expert on hallucinations, a guy with a PhD in psychology, who'd been a professor of psychology for 20 years at a major Midwestern university, author of 42 books on psychology, president of a national association of psychologists. I figured this guy knows what he's talking about. And so I laid out the information, I laid out the evidence. I said, now, Dr. Collins, would you not concede that based on the evidence, these people merely saw hallucinations? And he looked at me and he said, Lee, there is no way. I said, well, you seem pretty sure of yourself. Why not? He said, Lee, you have to understand something about the nature of hallucinations. Hallucinations are individual events. They're like dreams. I can't say to you, how'd you like that dream I had last night? Doesn't work that way. The hallucinations are in our minds. They don't spread like the common cold. I mean, it's not like you can wake up your spouse in the middle of the night and say, honey, wake up. I'm having a great dream about a vacation in Maui. Let's both go back to sleep. We'll have the same dream. We'll save all the airfare. This will be great. Can't do that. I wish we could. I really wish we could, but we can't. In fact, then he said something I will never forget. He said, Lee, 515 people having the same hallucination at the same time will be a bigger miracle than the resurrection itself. And then he added this. He said, and by the way, if these were merely hallucinations, then I assume the body is still in the tomb, right? Oops, the body's missing. Friends, these were not hallucinations. These weren't legends. This wasn't mythology. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't wishful thinking. These were actual appearances of the resurrected Jesus Christ that transformed people who encountered him. In fact, it transformed people who were willing to go to their death, proclaiming that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, but he proved it by returning from the dead. And they were willing to go to their death, not just because they believed it, not just because they had faith in it. They were willing to go to their death because they were there. They touched him, they talked with him, they ate with him. They knew it was true. And knowing the truth, they were willing to die for it. Friends, I spent 2 years of my life investigating this stuff. Finally, one Sunday afternoon, I thought, man, I've been doing this so long. I've got so much data and evidence and all this stuff. I got to organize it. I got to figure this out. And I went alone in my room. And I took a yellow legal pad. And I put a line down the middle. And I said, you know what? On one side, I'm going to put the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. On the other side, I'm going to put the evidence against it. I'm just going to see where it all comes out. And I started writing. Page after page after page after page after page after page. And finally, I put my pen down. I said, wait a minute. In light of this avalanche of evidence that points so powerfully toward the truth of Christianity, it would require more faith to maintain my atheism than to become a Christian. Honestly, I mean that. Honestly. I mean, what do I mean by that? I mean the evidence was like a river, like a whitewater river flowing toward a conclusion, flowing in a direction. To maintain my atheism, I would have to swim upstream against all this evidence flowing the other direction. I couldn't do that. I was trained in journalism and law to respond to truth. And so I sat there. I said, you know what? Based on the historical data, I believe that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, but he proved it by returning from the dead. And then I thought, okay, is that it? Am I done? Is that it? I didn't know what to do. Honestly, I just sat there. I thought, okay. And then I remembered a Christian friend of mine had pointed out a verse to me earlier. So I got my Bible, I looked it up. John 1:12 says, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believed in his name. And I noticed something. If you extract the active verbs from that verse, it forms an equation of what it means to become a child of God. Believe plus receive equals become. And I thought, okay, I believe. I got that part down. I believe Jesus is the Son of God who proved it by returning from the dead. I got that part down. But I realized that's not enough. That verse says, I need to receive this free gift of forgiveness and eternal life that Jesus offers out of his grace. I cannot merit it. I cannot earn it. But he offers it as a free gift of his grace. And when I did that, I would become a child of God. And so I got on my knees next to my bed. And I poured out a confession of a lifetime of immorality that would, it would curl your hair. And then I received complete and total forgiveness through Jesus Christ. And at that moment, I became a child of God. And my very next thought, my very next thought was, hey, I should probably tell Leslie about this. Maybe my wife would like to know. So I walked out of our bedroom, and I walked down the hallway, and I looked into the kitchen, and there was Leslie standing behind the kitchen sink. And in front of her, remember I told you my little daughter, Allison? Well, Allison was almost 5 years old at that point. And she was on her tippy toes, and she was reaching up, and for the first time, she was able to touch the faucet. So I walked down the hallway, I looked in the kitchen, Allison says, look, I can touch it, I can reach it. I said, wow, you're really getting big. And she ran off. And I said to my wife, honey, that's how I feel. I said, I feel like